Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Growth Clinic Podcast. On this episode, we have the relationship coach, Pat Stedman, and we discuss why he decided to become a relationship coach, how women play their own games in relationships, understanding high vibration relationships, understanding communication and sub-communication, why women end up with low value men, and understanding the alpha, sigma, and beta archetypes. And I hope you enjoyed the rest of the show. All right, Pat Stedman. Welcome to the Growth Clinic Podcast. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great, brother. It's good to be on.
Yeah. So, do you mind telling us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, I'm a dating and relationship coach for men, and I've been in this industry for over 7 years now, about 7.5 years.
Well,
And yeah.
Why did you decide to become a relationship strategist or expert?
Well, the short story is I struggled with women. I got into game, learned a lot, learned how to get better with women, do well with women, and then I wanted to leave my job in corporate America. Wasn't convinced about going to law school. I had gone through the whole process, but I kind of had cold feet last second. I wanted to start my own business. And a lot of the guys who were in the community that I was a part of, that, we had been interested in women, picking up women, etc., they encouraged me to do it professionally. Initially when I was thinking of starting a business, I was going to make like a cookie business. Like I had no idea. I had no idea what I was going to do. I just wanted to do something for myself. And that was the moment when I suddenly was like, I guess I can be a teacher. I don't need to always be just a student.
Yeah. So, what were you like before with women before you started?
I would say that before I started learning about this stuff. Yeah. Well, I wasn't good. But one of the things about it is it's interesting to look back. I mean, I was anxious. I think that's the main thing. I was pretty anxious and had a really hard time. I didn't know what women liked. Didn't know what they were interested in. And I didn't understand myself at all. So there was a lot of anxiety about how to reconcile like my desire to be with a beautiful woman and my inability to know what to do and to feel like I was going to be judged all the time. I actually had a girlfriend in high school, second part of high school. She's a very pretty girl. Like I definitely, but I had no idea how I got her. Like I had no idea. It was one of those things like I probably was doing some things right, but I didn't know what that was. And so when that relationship ended, I was really, really fucked. Let's put it that way. I really had no idea. I was like, I'm never gonna have an attractive girl again. I don't know how to do this. So that's when I got into this stuff, because it it changed the premise in my mind. Like before, I thought who I was who I was always going to be. And then that's when the idea entered my mind that I can change.
Yeah. So what did you change to?
Well, it was on two different directions predominantly. I mean, there's so much stuff, right?
Yeah.
There's so much stuff, but I'll just give the broad strokes. The first was the inner related stuff, like the inner work, as they'd say.
Yeah.
And getting to the root of a lot of my anxiety and social anxiety in particular. So I would have panic attacks around that time when I'd go out to social events, just because I felt like I'd be judged. I felt like, I didn't fit in. And so I was doing that, trying to understand my mind and why that stuff was happening. And then at the same time, I was learning basically how to interact with people in a good way socially, how to be, in particular when it came to women, how to like be more cocky, so to speak. I don't eventually you integrate a lot of this behavior and it doesn't, but at that time, that was probably one of the big breakthroughs for me, was that I just was talking, I was like very self-depreciating, and it's one, it's not to say you can never make a joke about yourself or whatever, but there are certain mental patterns that people have. And so if your sort of standard thing is sort of being self-depreciating, and so yeah, some of the early game stuff was me really like the simple stuff, and this comes from a famous old school dating guru, David D'Angelo, but cocky funny, and made a huge difference.
Yeah, so I've been getting lots of comments like the whole topic around game and all those things are good for getting women, but aren't good for keeping women. So what's your opinion about that?
I think it's mostly true. I'll just make a caveat. I mean, and I was just writing about this today on my email list, but the issue with game is that it stems around validation. So it's this way of trying to get, the opposite sex to be attracted to you, and then that feels good, right? So, but it's an affected behavior. It can work really well to get a girl, and then maybe up through the first few months. But by the time you get to 3-6 months, certainly, now you start to get revealed. And so this sort of image that you've conveyed of this like fantasy guy, it starts to crumble, basically. She's going to want you to act in a way that you don't always act. Part of your regular personality starts to slip out. And that creates a lot of fights and collapse a lot of these relationships. And a lot of guys who get into game will just not ever leave that 3-month period or so with women, because it doesn't feel good to then have the woman either, they'll say she gets dramatic, right? Or whatever. So from that standpoint, you can say, well, maybe game gets you a girl, but she doesn't help you to keep her. And it's true in the sense that a relationship needs to evolve into something based on connection versus validation. But I will say this: understanding, like, game at the end of the day is understanding how social interactions, understanding how women work, basically. And that stuff is really invaluable. I mean, you want to connect with a woman versus seeking validation. Okay. But there's a lot of stuff in game that helps you to understand also how women operate, and that allows you to connect with them better. So a lot of it at the end of the day is not necessarily the technique, so to speak. It's the intention behind the use of the technique that is really relevant here.
So yeah, so if any of your students comes to you and tells you like they want to create a long-term relationship with their partners, or they want to find a girl, or they want to find a wife, basically, for a long-term commitment, how you approach that?
Well, when I see guys who are like, don't get into any sort of serious relationship with a woman, I mean, it's just funny to me, because they have issues with commitment. I mean, I understand how people think and how they operate. So it's, I don't, I mean, depends. I just kind of ignore it if I'm not in a close dynamic with the person. If I have a client who comes in and this is something that he's dealing with, I'll help to deconstruct the belief with him. And one of the important things when it comes to coaching is that you don't just tell people do this or do that, or you have to do this or you have to do that. It doesn't work. And it's not really of service anyway to the individual. Nobody they don't benefit if you take away their agency. There are some guys who actually want you to just tell them what to do. And the problem with that is often they don't do what you tell them to do if you were to go about it. But even if they did, it's kind of like they're just taking orders from an outside source. And the ultimate goal is to get them operating from their internal source, right? They don't want to be operating because, oh, what is this woman going to do? Or what is this person going to think? Like, I don't want them to also operate that way with me. So it's very much encouraging them to make choices, but to understand the consequences of choices. So, for instance, some guys, they'll get really pulled in by a woman who's gaming them. And I would say one of my specialties and really distinguishing skills when it comes to other coaches is girl game. Like, as far as I'm aware, I coined the term, and I talk a lot about what women do to get guys, interested in them and how it messes with their head. I'll just say this: girl game is so, like, guys will learn all this stuff about how to get women, but they don't understand defensive strategies. And you can't just, if you and the thing about girl game that's so nefarious is that girl game, to use like a military kind of term, it's an envelopment strategy. So with women, they'll validate your ego. So they're going to be super submissive. They're going to be so sweet. They're going to be sexual. They're going to be absolutely perfect, right? And as a guy, you're going to get completely carried away with it. And you're going to start to feel like you're the man. You're going to tell your, oh yeah, she's never had a guy like me before in bed. She's like obsessed with me. She can't. And the guy, even if he feels like he's like the big wig, whatever, in spite of himself, he gradually falls more and more for her because he's getting his ego pumped up big time. And then what happens is there comes a certain point where the guy is pretty much at this point on board with the girl, right? He's like, all right, I'm going to commit. I'm going to make this work. I'm going to, she's worth it, right? She's worth it. And then the girl like pulls the rug out from under him. And suddenly there's problems. Suddenly there's these, well, I just really upset when you said this, and I don't know how I feel about this. And so then she starts to withdraw, and the guy has this impulse to try to fix it. And he's like, well, like try to bring it back, because she was obsessed with him, right? So she's still obsessed. He just needs to like fix this thing. And then the more effort he puts into trying to fix it, then the more she pulls back from the whole situation. And the guy ends up very often blaming himself. Like, oh, I messed this up. Oh, he doesn't know why it happened. She was so perfect. I don't know what I did. It's just a girl game, right? It's all it is. But so if a guy gets involved with a girl like that, good luck getting him to not go after her. Like, if he's never experienced this before, he is going to go in. You can't tell him, yeah, she's gaming you. And he's going to be like, oh yeah, okay, I'm done with her. The number of guys who will do that is slim. Like, he's getting some of the best sex of his life. He's just elated. So what I'll do is I'll say, okay, look, she's gaming you. And this is why she's gaming you, but go ahead and experience it. Go forward and enjoy yourself with it. And at a certain point, this is going to happen. X or Y is going to happen. And he's like, okay, and so it's like, I like to describe it like I put the rope around their waist as they go into the quicksand, so you pull them out afterwards. But that is actually how they break patterns, because then they're allowing themselves to go in, but they're going in with eyes wide open. And so when she starts to do things, they click much faster. And so he doesn't end up going in as deep. And he's able to understand about how women work, this dark part of female psychology, let's say, and is able to come out from it relatively unscathed.
Yeah, and I feel like most women play this game because at the beginning they're always soft and then later on you get to see their true identity. So everybody's actually gaming each other.
Yeah. No, it's 100% right. I mean, the guy and the girl will both game each other. And that's usually what happens. That's usually what happens. You know, sometimes only one party does the gaming, but usually you're going to get drawn towards each other because especially if I'm just being honest, you get to a certain level, you're going to be drawn towards it because it's like that movie Cruel Intentions. You ever see that movie? That's an old movie. It's based on a book from 17th century France called Dangerous Liaisons. And that basically outlined this sort of court intrigue in Versailles. So basically, I mean, this is a little digression here, but in Versailles, Louis XIV had all the nobles. They had to come and basically hang out at Versailles with him. And it was basically like massive drama all the time. Everybody was competing for influence and prestige. And there were all sorts of sort of sexual liaisons and, you know, affairs of the heart and manipulation going on. And it was quite ruthless. And that became the premise of this movie. I think it was in the early 2000s or late 90s, called Cruel Intentions, which is about some preppy kids and, you know, them playing these sort of mind games. Anyway, I really recommend people see it. It's a really, really good. I don't really even like movies very much, but it's a really, really good film.
So anyways, on a video you posted on YouTube, you said dating apps are problematic.
Mm-hmm.
Do you mind? That drew my attention a lot, and I need you to throw some light on there.
Well, I think it's problematic in the sense that I don't remember exactly what I said in that video, but they're problematic because there's a very low attention span for most people there,
Yeah.
and you're playing particularly to superficial qualities. So women in particular on dating apps, if she's halfway decent looking, she's going to be bombarded with as many as 5 to 10 times as many matches as you are. And while women are more interested in quality than quantity, nevertheless, it does affect their perception of themselves versus you. Like in real life, maybe, you know, one guy is going to approach her, or, you know, let's just go back before people were socially anxious and awkward. Maybe she'd have a couple guys making comments, but they would be making it, you know, she get a chance to feel out their vibe and their game, right? She get a chance to feel out, oh, is this guy just saying like, hey, you look hot, you know, like kind of, or maybe he was being sweet, but he was being a bit, you know, needy. And even if you were like the hottest girl in town, you know, you're going to have a bunch of suitors, but the number of suitors a girl like that would get in a year is the number they would get in a day on a dating app. So it messes up women's perception of things. And so as a result, you're always going to be consistently getting lower than what you could get on a dating app. It's pretty much the case. Yeah, pretty much how it is. How it is.
Speaking of vibe, another content you wrote on, I think Twitter, you said something about low vibration women, and I was really confused at what you meant by low vibration women and high vibration relationships. Do you mind sharing some light on that?
Sure. So vibration, it's kind of like another. So this, you get into the idea of consciousness and energy, and the fact that, you know, we all vibrate at different frequencies, and so what you're drawn towards, who you're drawn towards, is a matter of your frequency. So a lower vibration woman is going to be a woman who is essentially, you know, into let's say a lot of these mind games.
Yeah.
She has a lot of need. She had like lower self-esteem. She has a lot of need. And so she's trying to take from other people to make herself feel better. So she's kind of stuck in that area of maybe she's got a lot of shame, guilt, lust, anger. She's down in that sort of area of things. She's not moving into what we would call passing the line of integrity, where she starts to take ownership over her life and her experiences, and starts to be like, okay, actually, I have, like, I'm not going to operate in this way. I'm not going to treat other people in this way. I'm not treat guys in this way. I'm not just going to try to take from people. I'm gonna, if I have some emotional issue, I'm going to figure out what's wrong and how to deal with it. And look, men and women are different. And I'll just say women, as a rule, in general, have a harder time doing that than men. It's kind of like they're more open to help, but they're less able to execute on it. Whereas men are less open to help, but more able to execute on it. So that's why you see lots of women seeking help and few men, but men tend to get more results than women who do. So a lot of times for a woman to do improvement in this area, it's very helpful that, a guy can guide her to it. But there needs to be some level of openness to this, some level of, integrity and desire to grow and to shift. That's what I'd say for the most part. If you have that intention with a woman and she's not just making it everything's your fault, that's a low vibration woman. You're not going to get any headway with a woman who thinks everything's your fault.
In terms of communication and sub-communication, how do you handle such a partner?
How do I handle
Like
sub?
low vibration woman?
Uh-huh.
If you have her as a partner, how do you communicate your opinions to her, because she doesn't take accountability for her actions and all of those things? How do you communicate?
So if I'm working with someone and he's been, let's say, married, and he's been with a woman, and he's kind of waking up himself, and he doesn't like the dynamic, and he wants to change the dynamic, and she's not awake to it. So she's resistant, and it's his fault. That's how she doesn't feel good, and it's his fault that she doesn't feel good. So there's a few things. The first thing he has to do is he has to learn to lead himself more, because a lot of a woman's frequency and dynamic is based on how the man himself leads. So if he might want to be treated differently, right? But if he's not grounded, if he's not actually leading and taking, like, it's like he wants to be treated like a leader, he wants to be treated better, but he's not acting like it. So a lot of it has to do with changing his behavior and changing his own sort of orientation towards needing her approval about the fact that he's doing, leading. Hey, look at me, mom, I'm leading. It's like that kind of stuff. He needs to break that. Now, the reason that's the first steps is because being able to break her out of that pattern is only going to be really possible when he's essentially ready to walk away. If you're dealing with like a lower vibration woman, or a woman who's trapped in a rough pattern, let's put it that way. And so then he's able to basically, he's not going to, when she does nasty stuff, he's going to be able to detach from it more and just simply put up a boundary. It's like, I'm not dealing with that stuff. I'm not gonna tolerate this. And he doesn't just like complain about it. Like, he actually, if she does it, then he responds. He'll tell her, like, if you do this, this is what's going to happen. And then she does it. And then he does that. And then he responds. He leaves, right? He leaves the situation. And that shows her that he actually has the integrity to do what he says he's going to do, which is staying up to her. And so then what's going to happen is two things. either the woman is going to kind of be woken up by it and will be like, you're right, and then I was wrong about this, and then there can start to be like a change in the relationship. Or she's going to get really dramatic and hysterical, and she's going to create more drama, and she's going to get more pissy and more nasty, in which case he's got to leave her.
So the action is him sub-communicating to her.
Well, he sub-communicates through his action, through staying up to her.
Yeah.
He sub-communicates that he's worthy of leading. So, and that in the cases of relationship is a lot of the problem. It's poor leadership. Now, all that said, not all women are willing to ever surrender in a relationship. And that comes down to a couple of different things, but I mean, at the end of the day, you can just say it's self-esteem, but you can get into, self-esteem and programming that's been layered on top of that, right? So like feminist programming, you have a woman who has low self-esteem, and then she's given feminist programming that tells her that she's a victim. And so then she will never want to surrender because she's decided it makes her feel even worse, even though it's actually the opposite. But there's a lot of dissonance there, and it's kind of a case by case basis to what extent you want to try to deprogram or deal with it.
Yeah, so I feel like those women who don't want to surrender power end up with low value men who are too scared to lead or something.
Yeah, I would say that's true. If they end up with any guy, it's a low value guy, because it's somebody, if a woman has low self-esteem, but she also, like, to prop up her sense of self, she needs to feel in control, she's going to find herself with a weak guy, because that guy's not going to threaten her ego at all. The problem is that she's not going to be attracted to him. So that's the dilemma that these women face. That's why they're, hanging out. They're 45 and hanging out with their cats. I mean, it's difficult for them to connect. The men that they're attracted to, they think are assholes, and the men that aren't assholes are not attracted to. So,
yeah. So, what is your opinion about the alpha, beta, sigma, and
epsilon, delta?
Yeah, a lot. I just know the three of them. I feel like they've become so much, and everybody has abused it to an extent, and it's getting irritating to hear every time.
Yeah, I think it's pretty stupid, to be honest. I get really tired of it. But I will say this, that at least alpha and beta can be, they at least, they're inappropriately used, I would say, but they at the very least set a parameter. So like, alpha is a guy that creates desire in a woman, and beta is a guy that creates comfort in a woman. That's at least how I interpret the terms. Now, where they mess up is that they'll talk about a guy being an alpha as like this sort of, Chad who goes around and hooks up with every girl, and that's an alpha. Whereas really an alpha, like, that man would never in a society be looked at as anything particularly special, to the extent he'd be able to do it. An alpha is actually, in, like, if you want to talk about male hierarchies, an alpha is a man that has desire and comfort. So they tried to like turn the term like alpha provider. It's like, well, yeah, alpha provider is alpha. The other one is more just a guy who's going around and playing the field, and which, fair enough, whatever. But these are not the men who are on the top of the totem pole in societies, in hierarchies. Now, and not even in terms of desirability from women, I would argue, because the alpha and beta, what happens with women is that if they're emotionally dysregulated, they'll tend to jump from, alpha. Well, they say alpha fucks beta bucks, right? They'll go and hook up with a guy, and he'll be emotionally unavailable, and she'll chase after him, and then eventually she gets burned out from that not working, and then she falls into the comfort of, beta provider guy who's there to take care of her emotionally and maybe materially, right? um but women aren't actually happy with either of these guys. They're just not. They're not. It's a And they're trying to get to this ideal woman, just like men are trying, ideal man, just like men are trying to look for the ideal woman. I mean, the ideal woman would be an integration between sort of bad bitch who gets your fucking mind all over the place, but great in bed, but super impulsive, dramatic. You can't, she disappears. Like, a lot of guys will chase after women like that. They're exhausting, and then they'll have a nice sweet girl, and she's like so good on paper, and she's pretty, but just kind of leaves him feeling dull and bored. It's the same deal. I mean, we're looking for a woman who gets us excited but doesn't like lower our self-esteem, because these sort of like alphas are people who ultimately exploit a low self-esteem aspect in the woman or a man. Now, the term sigma, I think, that's just somebody who wants to be outside of the Sigma's made the term sigma. It's like it's for guys who don't want to be associated with any hierarchy, but who are good with women. And look, do they exist? Sure. There's a blog that talked about that classified men further. They had delta males, and they had all sorts of, like, who gives a fuck? Honestly, doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's true. So
I'm an alpha. I'm a
yes,
sigma. I'm a bit, it's just like bullshit.
yeah, people have started to misunderstand that thing. Everybody thinks being an alpha is the muscular guy who is loud and brash and just annoying and all of those things. It's when I sometimes I open Twitter or YouTube and I see all the videos talking about alpha, and it just irritates me. Like, these guys aren't. You won't want to hang out with these guys on a normal day. Yeah, so I just feel like it's quite a stretch now.
Yeah.
So when you get a patient, how do you reach out to him? What's the first thing you do?
Well, when if a client and I decide to work together,
I said
then
patient.
yeah, it's okay. It's okay. When a client and I decide to work together, the first thing we do is we jump on a 3-hour deep dive call. And so that's pretty intense. I don't know a lot of people who do something like that, but we go through their entire life story, focusing on their family and on women that they've dated. And what it basically does is it gets to the root of their unconscious patterns when it comes to women, and why they've found themselves in particular predicaments with women throughout their lives. Very often, guys will either be completely clueless, or they'll know certain things, but they're not going to have it on a deep level understood. And they come out of the call almost every time. It's like, holy crap. This is what I've been doing. This is why, the fact that I had this dynamic with my mom at this age, and that, that this thing happened with this girl. Now, this is my lifelong pattern, and why I have been feeling so bad when women do this, and I act this way. It's like so it's very, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess elucidating, whatever. So then, in addition to that, depends on the client package. Some guys, there's a range of follow-up from there. Basically, guys who need more help, who have more comprehensive issues, are going to go for a more intensive package where there's a lot of follow-up calls, which are 30 to 60 minutes, usually 30, sometimes 60. And they also have my masterclass, which is over 18 hours of coaching, basically. And that's a good lower ticket item. Also, you can buy the masterclass separately. It's like the encyclopedia.
It's been good talking to you. So where can people find you on the internet?
Well, they can find me on Twitter, which is at Pat_Stedman, STEDMAN. And they can also find me on YouTube, Pat Stedman, Pat Stedman Coaching, and you can check out my channel. And I also have an email list that, I send out emails 3 times a week. It's very well acclaimed email list. It's very good stuff. You can sign up for that on my Twitter page or my website, and you will essentially get a PDF of my book for free when you sign up. So
Thank you for coming to the show.
Awesome, man. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, have a nice day. Thank you for coming this far. I created the program for people feeling stuck, struggling with an addiction, trying to find their path, and want to become whole again. It is called the Self-Mastery Program. Please check out the show notes to get a copy, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day.